Have you ever wondered what would happen if you combined a Triceratops and a Moon? Well, me neither, but let's see. First of all, delete cube, add simple shapes to block out the head of the Triceratops, add horns, third horn, do cool anatomy, add little horns, that would make the frill, yeah, really satisfying. Mirror it, add some wrinkles because they add some cool realism aspect, just like this. Now the coolest part, which is adding the scales. Nice. And now super difficult moon sculpting. Here is the result. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaurs every day. The themes are Hatzegopteryx Cosmic. Delete the default cube. Add simple shapes for the skull. Add neck extruding vertices. Vertex. Create torso using simple shapes. Add membrane for the wings. Now you want to sculpt some muscles, but not too much because pterosaurs weren't really that bulky. You've sculpted the base, yay! Now you can stylize the sculpt using, for example, booleans. Now you model the tongue and color the model. Congratulations on creating the Hatzegopteryx, a cosmic one. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaurs every day. The themes are Camarasaurus and Zombie. Delete the default cubes, start adding basic shapes for the head, extrude the neck, add the skin modifier, add the holes for the skull, add muscle like the sternocleidomastoid, and indicate the spine, add traps, add wrinkles for the realism, more wrinkles, and now the spikes on top of its head. Add gums using simple shapes. They are very useful actually, you'll see later on. And now add the teeth. Pull down the lips using mask, and now it's time for the stylization. Yeah, this one is freaky. And now it's time for the scales and color. Here's the final result. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaurs every day. The themes are Giganotosaurus and Chained. Delete the default cube, add simple shape for the skull, add neck, extricate this shape, introduce the mouth, add holes to the skull, add muscles to the neck, rotate the skull, improve the forms and the silhouette of the model. Add torso, add hands. By the way, if you want to know how to sculpt hands, you can check my video right here, it is on the channel. Add muscles to the torso, connect the torso to the neck, add wrinkles using roll brush, improve the shape a bit. You can also use clay strips, and now use alphas for the wrinkles. Now add scales, add chain to make him look cool, and now color the whole model. Here's the final result. Hell yeah. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaurs every day. The themes are Nodosaurus and spiders. Ooh, spooky. Delete default cube, start doing the shape for the body. Establish the landmarks. Add limbs using the method shown here, which is just extruding the vertices and then adding the skin modifier. Now add some muscles. It's not that difficult. Now add the fingers, and now start playing with alphas for the armor. Be a bit creative. Use clay strips brush to break the repetitiveness. Now it's time to connect the spider limbs to the body, start painting the body. Change of the design. Here's the final result. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaurs every day. The themes are Ceratosaurus My Beloved and Jester. Delete cube, add sphere, make it of the shape of the skull, add jaw, add muscles of the jaw. Now add the neck using vertices, make it a good shape. Now add horns, model them. Do the same for the other two. Make better shape of the skull, add bony landmarks, add muscles to the neck, add gums, add teeth, upper teeth too. Start adding wrinkles using draw brush. Make armor pieces until you're satisfied. Add alphas for the wrinkles and add alphas for the scales. Now it's time to color it. Use option Mask by Cavity for your advantage. Yeah, it came out very edgy. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaurs every day. The themes are Iguanodon and Blind.
This is where the fun begins.
With default cube, make the shape of the torso. Start adding limbs using skin modifier. Now create fingers, add to the hands and feet, create lower jaw. Slowly start adding muscles to the whole body. Improve the fingers on the hands, feet. Improve the whole shape of the model. Start adding spikes on the back. Now start adding some wrinkles, just like that, using multiple brushes. Now we can get to alphas for the wrinkles and for the scales. Now let's get into texturing. And now let's add some antlers, just for fun, also using skin modifier. Here's the final model. Nice. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaurs every day. The themes are Austroraptor and Reaper. Read the default cube, add cube, start modeling the side. Extrude faces, make handle, and start making the blade. Just by extruding and using some topology basics, you should be fine. You should have something like this. Now start sculpting the skull, improvise a bit, and then follow the reference. Like literally, just make the holes where they should be holes. Now create the bone of the eye, just select every second edge, scale it. Start adding teeth, now improve the shape of the skull and add some details. Start adding the vertebrae. Model and then sculpt. Duplicate it and you have the neck. Now use closed physics to create the robe and give him the scythe. He's a good boy. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaurs every day. Today we got Edmontosaurus and Gothic. Sculpt simple shape of the skull and start adding details, add neck. Now we get to doing the torso. Obviously simple shape as well, once again. Start adding the limbs, add sphere for the deltoids, now muscles, and feet, and some anatomy obviously. For the legs are pretty difficult to do. Improve the feet, and now it's the wrinkles, they're pretty damn important, to be honest. Even more wrinkles, and now even more wrinkles, but with alphas. They're pretty helpful, honestly, and save a lot of time. Now coloring, proto feathers, and can't forget the fishnets. And the witch hat. Yeah, here's the final model. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting.
I like the way you kiss me. I like the way you...
Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaurs every day. And day by day they get weirder and weirder as we get closer to the end of the month. The keywords for today are Pachyrhinosaurus and Curse. So what better way to give a curse to a human? To get a human we need to sculpt a human. Firstly blocking out and then adding gradually more and more details. Forgot how to create stamps. I put the model into Accurig, which allows me to rig it without doing too much work, and actually looks pretty good. I put it into Blender and pose it, and then I start adding details and merging the Pachyrhinosaurus head to human head. Yeah, really weird. Can't forget about the teeth. They really add to the creepiness. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. I start out with a base mesh that I paint a mask on and then I extract it right here. To make it right, make sure you have these settings on. Just showing it here. Then I tweak the settings. Basically the solidify modifier. I tweak it around as if it was a cloth. I apply it and smooth out the edges. Now I sculpt out the dress, make the main big shapes, and then I mask out a part of this dress. Now I get into sculpting folds, and adding this little scarf thing, adding the necklace, adding the veil, which then I put a cloth modifier on for the realism, and then I poly painted at reddish parts where there is most blood flow. I make the gloves using the same techniques shown before. I paint it as well, and then I add the skull. I start sculpting it, making the holes where there should be holes in the skull. Then I mask out the crests and I pull the geometry out so that it makes sense. Now I add the teeth and conform them to the reference. I put the skull and kind of tweak it around so that it makes sense as a mask. Yeah, and then I cut part of it, and then I add the lower jaw. Nothing new here, same drill. I make a complete mask of it, or a helmet, I don't know how to call it. Same drill for the lower jaw, adding the teeth and then mirroring them to the other side. Now I dig into the veil and I have this result after some time of tweaking. You should have this. Nice. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. I start out by deleting the default cube, adding the main shapes of the sauropod body. I add deltoid muscles and start adding limbs using vertices. I sculpt the head, get the main shapes as well, conform it. I create a new neck using curves. I get the shapes of the muscles for the limbs and for the body. I start adding fingers and toes very simply, and then I model the claws that add the menacing look to the whole Brachiosaurus, and I add them to hands and feet. I add anatomy to the legs in a bit higher poly count, and then I tweak the pose for the dinosaur. I start adding eyes, a lot of eyes, as you can see. And then I color the whole model to make it look really fleshy and disgusting. And then just some final tweaks. Nice. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the October where I sculpt different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. I start out by creating a custom VDM. Link to the add-on is in the pinned comment. First of all, I add mass and I start refining. I add the top part and I crease it a bit and take away mass and add mass to add some roughness to it. And next up I create variations to it, so tilt it to the right and tilt it to the left, and the last one, which is a spiky thing. And it works. Nice. I create the model by creating very simple shapes for the head and for the lower jaw, and you know, you need to get this step as best as you can because it's gonna be the foundation of the whole model. And I create limbs. And can't forget about the club. And I start conforming the model to the reference which is in my background. Next up is adding the fingers and the feet. Once again, I use the diagram for my own good. And then I start adding the nails using the same technique, which is modeling. And I conform it to the blueprint. Same drill for the front. And once again, conforming to the reference, to the blueprint. I start adding some details to the face, muscles, and some bigger scales. And then I totally improvise for the anatomy. I didn't know how to do it. And then I make use of the VDMs, using different variations and constantly looking at references. For the middle, I don't use symmetry. Then I create like the margins between the armor. Next up, I jump to making the anatomy for the limbs, starting with the front ones first, and then to the back ones. I use the analogy from theropod anatomy. I mean, it's pretty similar for all the dinosaurs. The backside, I create a callus. and I connect the fingers to the leg. I add some more details to the face. Next step is pretty long and can be fun. It's just refinement and adding wrinkles. And then I mask every single scute to create these like smaller armor scales. And then I proceed to paint. I mask by cavity and add some details. And I refine it once again. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to October, where I sculpt different dinosaur-themed sculpts every day. Read the default cube and add a simple sphere and start creating the shape of the skull. Get a reference and now just trace the geometry to the background. Add the lower jaw, aka concave, start making it to the shape of the reference. Improve the shape a bit and start making holes of the skull. It's pretty simple. Now make sure it all looks good from all the angles. Add the bone of the eye and start digging in and then symmetrize to create holes, which is a pretty good tip, by the way. Then put a reference in the background and start putting bones in place, and start from the neck vertebra, create a shape, and then add this like spiky thing from the side and just duplicate it, just slightly changing the shape every time you put a new vertebra. Next up, start putting ribs and the vertebra. It's good to have a 3D model in the background so that you can use it as a reference more than just a 2D plain image. Now put the burr spikes, the famous ones, and just keep on changing their shapes until you reach the end of the tail. Now add the pelvis. Ischium and pubis, and make sure that they are mirrored. Add these parts of the spine. Add the clavicle. And start adding the gastralis, which are ossified abs, basically. Add the spikes on the side on the tail, and the spikes on the bottom. And then add the sternum. And start adding bones of the arms and hands and claws and all these little parts. Now it's time for the legs. Just follow the reference. Add this melt and tarsals and metatarsals and other little bones. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the October, where I create different dinosaur-themed sculpts every day. First of all, I delete the default cube and add simple sphere, creating the simple base shape of the skull and the lower jaw. I dig in to make the concave. And now I dig in the holes of the skull using the reference that's in the background for more precision. And I improve the overall shape. Next up, I add the neck using vertices and then applying skin modifier to them. And then I use the grab brush to make a better shape of it. Then I add a sphere and conform it to the shape of the torso and the tail, which could count as one. I add the bony landmarks and improve the silhouette. Next up, I add the deltoid muscle as a one single block and add the limbs, applying skin modifier to them and subdivision, as you can see right here. I apply the modifiers and create better silhouette shape, so that it's easier later on. I add the fingers to the hand, cannot forget about that. I prefer to model them first. And then I add the feet, so I create this simple block and then create the fingers, also modeling them. And now I add the claws to the fingers on the hand and also on the feet. Now if I have the body parts as a separate meshes, I can easily pose them to create a pose, like a symmetric sculpt later on. It's just a matter of tweaking and playing around with shapes. And now I add anatomy. It's like takes twice as much time. And then I do a simple painting inspired by Black Mamba. And then I add wrinkles using clay strips and draw brush and draw sharp. This process is pretty fun, honestly. And now I've got my own Mesozoic Chihuahua. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the Noctober where I create different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. I started by deleting the default cube, adding sphere, and using the grab brush I create the main silhouette and shape of the skull and the lower jaw, which is not a surprise to those who watch me. I create the neck, and then using the grab brush I improve the silhouette. Using the same method, I create the torso, add bony landmark, I add the limbs and the deltoid muscle. And then I start using the grab brush, I start improving the shape of the legs and the arms, and then adding the fingers. Also add the toes to the legs. I prefer the modeling way. And I also model the claws. I use the background image to improve silhouette. I add details to fingers and start adding muscles and all the anatomy parts to the legs and to the torso. Can't forget about the arms. Then I add more details to the head and the face, making the eye area and eyes. Then I start adding the feathers using the snake hook, which makes it look very spiky for some reason, so I decided to use the inflate brush to make it look more like wool. Then I painted using the mask by cavity, giving it a pillow lava look. And then just more improvements to the whole color palette and all that stuff. Painting the nails. Also, breaking the symmetry is a very nice touch, so do this. Here's the final result. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the Noctober where I create different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. First up, I delete the default cube and add sphere. Then I conform the shape of the sphere into the shape of the skull. I add the neck and improve the shape of it. Then I add the torso using the same technique and block out the deltoids and the limbs. Also I block out the feet and start adding fingers for the hands. Just like that. Can't forget about the famous long claws of the Therizinosaurus. Then I add fingers to the feet, also known as toes. I pull up a reference into the background to make a better shape of the dinosaur. I was really confused when making it. Then I improve and add details to the feet. Now, since most of the body parts are separate objects, I can pose them to make the sculpt feel dynamic. I also add anatomy to the torso, legs, and arms. And now it's time for some wrinkles. Yay! I add details to the face by adding tongue and improving the eye area. Also adding the teeth, the lower, and using the same method I create the upper teeth. Gotta put them in place. Also add the eyes. After that I can jump into painting and creating a menacing pattern. Now you've got your own prehistoric turkey with anger issues. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the October where I create different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. I start out by deleting the default cube and adding a sphere. Using grab brush I conform it to the shape of the Baryonyx skull, which I have in my references. I do the same for the lower jaw. And I dig in for the concave of the mouth. Next up I pull up a reference and put it in the background to make a better shape of the skull. Then I mask out a mesh for the crest, and I make the holes for the skull. Next thing, I create the neck using vertices and then applying a skin modifier to it. And then I add the torso. When conforming the sphere, I keep in mind the shape of the and silhouette of the model, because it's like one of the most important things, so definitely do not skip it around. Next thing, I add the deltoid muscle. Using reference I get the general shape and start adding the limbs, same method as I did for the neck. Then I apply the modifier and using grab brush I improve the silhouette and block out the feet using simple modeling techniques. Can't forget about the small finger on the side. And then also create the fingers for the arm, just like this. Then I can easily model the claws for the feet and for the hands. And for the hands I create a really powerful cyclod claws, as a Baryonyx would have. Then I improve the shape of the feet and sculpt in some details. And it's time for the leg anatomy. It's pretty simple. I will show it to you there in the time lapse. You can follow it if you want. Then the next thing is adding muscles to the torso and to the arms. Then, since the objects are separate, I can easily pose them to create a dynamic sculpt. Then I just add wrinkles to make the model a bit more believable. Next up, I model the teeth and duplicate them to match the reference. Then I mask out the lips and pull them out to give it a more natural look. Then I add eyes and improve the area. And then I can paint the model to make it look like a leucistic Baryonyx. Here's the final result. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the October where I create different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. First of all, delete the default cube and add sphere. Conform it to the shape of a skull of a Stegosaurus as much as possible by your observation skills. Next up, load the reference and put it in the background for more accuracy, because sometimes you can make mistakes, and to fix them you can use a reference in your background. So now create the neck and make a better shape of it. Keep in mind it should look good from all angles. Next up, create the torso and fit it to the reference and create pelvis. Then add deltoid muscles, block out them, and start adding limbs. So simple block out, just for now. Then block out the soles of the feet, and for the front feet then start adding the plates. So these are like one of the most important things on the Stegosaurus. Then start rotating them to the sides. So don't mirror them, just every second one of these plates should be rotated. Can't forget about the tagomizer. Yeah, this part of the tail has an actual name. Then start adding the fingers, which you're just following the reference, and start adding them up. I also had a 3D reference so that I get the shape correctly. Then it's time to start adding the muscles, so I just used the draw sharp brush and then I improve the shape with clay strips. And it's time to adding the muscles to the arms and legs. Then I start adding the claws and the fingernails. And then, since the objects are separate, I can start posing the Stegosaurus in a pose of a cheerful waddle. And yeah, you gotta pose the plate as well. Then I start adding the wrinkles, and also can't forget about the alien look, which I decided to add a tendrils coming out of Stegosaurus' mouth as it had some type of parasite. And I improved the shape of the head and add some more details. And add eyeballs. Next thing, I start to texture, or maybe paint. Yeah, paint is a better way to put it. The Stegosaurus, adding an interesting pattern. And here's the final result. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the Noctober, where I create different dinosaur-themed sculpts every day. Today's sculpt is not for the faint of heart, just saying, alright? Now, block out the head and add the jaw muscles and make the holes of the skull, just generally. Then add the neck with added skin modifier and add the torso with tail and fit it to the reference that's in the background. Next up, add limbs, just by extruding vertices, applying skin modifier and subdivision. Then start adding general bony landmarks such as hips and scapula. Then model the fingers, just like I show it here, and duplicate it to fit the reference. Can't forget about the menacing claws of the Maip. Next up, block out the sole of the foot, which is pretty simple. Just modify a cylinder. Now model the toes and duplicate them. Also remember that the side toes are gonna be shorter and smaller than the middle one. And now add the claws to the feet. Now make the dinosaur sit. I know it's not simple. The commands don't work, you just need to move the vertices around. Now put the hadrosaur in Maip's arms. And start posing the baby dinosaur and the Maip. Remove the head. I never thought I'd say this, but yeah, remove the head. Now start adding muscles to the Maip, which takes twice as much time and is twice as much difficult because it's on asymmetry. And now start adding the fat pillows to the hands. And I decided to model the teeth a bit later on. I usually do it earlier on, but it doesn't really matter that much. So copy this workflow for the upper teeth. And with some tweaks and coloring, you have your Maip devouring a hadrosaur. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the Noctober, where I create different dinosaur-themed sculpts every day. First of all, delete the default cube and add sphere. Put reference in the background so that you are more accurate with making the basic shapes, and don't forget to make the hollow spaces for the mouth. Then add a neck and start shaping up the torso. It's important so that you look from all the angles. Next, block out the deltoids so they will have that inverted C shape. And don't forget about the limbs as well, and sculpt out the pelvis. Then start adding some simple muscle shapes. If you don't know what to add, just mix up dinosaur and lizard anatomy together. Then block out the hands and start adding the fingers, which is pretty straightforward, similar as I do it in all my videos. Duplicate it and put it as for the feet because the shape is really similar. And even more muscles. Next up, I try to fit the general geometry shape to the reference and add the spine shapes. Then start adding the holes to the skull, because since this is not a dinosaur, don't make as many holes. Start adding teeth slowly but surely, and then using the same method to the lower teeth. After you're done with it, mirror it to the other side. Then start adding muscles to the legs, so what you want to keep in mind is that you show the gastroc muscles and the quad muscles, I like to call them. And then for the arms, do the same stuff, add tricep, forearm muscles, and add bicep. It's pretty similar to human anatomy in some way. And then add claws. It's super badass to do so. I don't know why, but it really adds up to the whole personality. Then start adding eyes. It's pretty straightforward as well. Just add a mass and make hole, and put the ball to the hole. And just reinforce the previously made shapes. And add wrinkles following the main flow. Then for the colors, I tried to make it look pretty dangerous, like red, green colors. And then as the final touch, I added acid in the Dimetrodon's mouth. Here's the final result. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the Noctober, where I create different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. Delete default cube and create custom VDMs, which you can get for free, by the way, if you join my Discord. Then I create the base shape for the skull, which is relatively simple. And then create the hollow shapes for the mouth. And create the shape for the torso using references. Block out the feet and hands. And make the alligator sit in a very comfortable position. Now model the teeth and add both to the lower and to the higher side of the head. Then add the jaw muscles and improvise on the muscles. I really don't know much about crocodile anatomy, so yeah. Here it is. But it's relatively similar to dinosaurs, so it wasn't terrible. And then I add the muscles to the limbs. And I just refine it even more to perfect the shape. And I know the shape from looking at many references. Then I add the fingernails and add the eyes. And I just improvise, like a lot actually. Then I add the osteoderms using my own VDMs. And I put them where they should be. I create the separation, like it was in armor. And I create the different type of the scales. And then even more improvisation. For the smaller scales, I use a different VDM, which has a lot of scales in one stroke. Then I add the bottom plates and refine the shapes even more. Then I paint the model using like alligator as the main reference, and also the Deinosuchus. And I try to make it as mean as possible actually, which isn't difficult because this guy is scary. Here's the final result. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the Noctober, where I create different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. First things first, delete the default cube and add sphere and conform it to a general shape of a hadrosaur skull. So keep in mind it has a beak, so that's like the main point, and also it has pretty big cheeks. I mean on the cheeks on the face, of course. Then I add neck. So I do it by eye, and then later on I put the reference in the background for more accuracy. And then I model the crest. And improve the shape of the neck. Then I add the torso, just following the reference as always. Then I model the limbs, put them in place, and apply skin modifier to give them some mass. And I add the deltoids, so deltoids are gonna be in the shape of a C. And then I add the soles of the feet and add the fingers. Like hadrosaur fingers are really weird, honestly. Then I decide to get rid of this twink-like neck and give him more testosterone and make his neck girthier. I add the pelvis and like indicate the lats a bit. And then I start adding mass to muscles, such as the sternocleidomastoid, and I just look at reference. That's the answer. And then I put the hadrosaur in a pose so that it is on all fours instead of just 2 legs. And then I start indicating muscles on the legs. Nothing too crazy, as always. Pretty much using the same workflow. And then since the parts are separate, I can add some asymmetry very easily, tweaking and rotating and moving. Then I add a really big ceratopsian horn. So the main inspiration was from the zombie back. Like, it had really bad injury, but it was still walking around. I decided like, this could have happened to a Lambeosaur, why not? And then I just add some details to the face. It's just a matter of adding and building up more and more details. So, wrinkles in the areas where there would be most movement. Nothing too crazy. As the last bit, I paint the dinosaur using similar coloring of a deer, which should resemble the main reference. Here's the end result. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the Noctober, where I create different dinosaur-themed sculpts every day. Read the default cube and add simple sphere, and then using grab brush, try to capture the silhouette of the skull. Then add neck and start adding torso and conforming it to the right general shape. Then it's time for the limbs, using the same method as for the neck, and also can't forget about the deltoids. Then I put the reference in the background to be more accurate with all the shapes. And then just tweaking some stuff around. Next up, modeling the sole of the foot and hand and adding fingers. So it's just simple modeling plus sculpting workflow. Then I add some details just like this and add the nail. I wouldn't call it a claw because they just don't feel like claws, you know what I mean? Yeah, same for the feet pretty much. Just adding more mass for the tendons. And then maybe this could go as a claw, I don't know. Is it sharp enough? Then I draw out the main muscles, such as the latissimus dorsi, pectoralis, sternocleidomastoid, and all those muscles that you don't really need to know the names of. And then it's just, I don't know, I was really afraid of doing legs, but now I feel super comfortable doing them and I cannot wait when I finally get to sculpt them. And then I sculpt and connect together deltoids and arms later on. And then I use my own VDMs to sculpt out the spikes, which you can get for free from my Discord, by the way. And then I add some details to the face, and I like to do the face as the last thing, actually. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I don't like it. Well, it's difficult for sure. And then it's just adding wrinkles in the areas of the most movement. And also decided to add some pebble-like scales around the back and a bit on the limbs. And then as the last thing, I paint the model using a similar coloration as a crow's have. And here is the final result. Subscribe for more dinosaur sculpting breakdowns. Welcome to the Noctober, where I create different dinosaur-themed sculpts every day. First of all, delete the default cube as always, add sphere, and using grab brush create the general silhouette of the Herrerasaurus skull and lower jaw as well. Remember to make the hollow space for the mouth. Next up, add neck, just manipulating vertices and adding skin modifier and subdivision levels to it. Then, using the same methods, I block up the torso and add deltoid muscles, which have that inverted C shape. Next up, I use vertices to show the general silhouette of the limbs, and I proceed to mirror them and add skin modifier and subdivision as well. Then I block out the feet and the sole of the feet, and then next up I model the fingers from a subdivided cube. And using the same method, I add the fingers. Like, I don't know what's up, but I really love adding claws, especially the hooked ones. Like, I don't know, it's so cool. Next up, I draw out the muscles on the dinosaur's body. Like, first of all, I like to show where they would be, and then I proceed to add mass to certain points. Like, I don't know, the calves would be protruding a bit, so then I add mass with with the clay strips. Yeah, pretty much the same workflow for all the body parts when it comes to adding muscles. Next up, I add spikes on the Herrerasaurus body along the back. I like to do it by hand because I have more control and I can add some randomness. Then I carve out the eye area and add the teeth, which are the main point of the sculpt. And I used deep sea fish as my main inspiration for this. And I also added a tongue to make him look a bit freaky. And then I'm using some of my custom VDMs, which you can get for free from my Discord server. And then I add wrinkles, and they would accumulate mainly in the areas where there would be most movement on the body. And then it's just time for painting the model. It's pretty standard procedure, just adding more and more layers of color. And here's the final result. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the Noctober, where I create different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. First, I delete default cube and add sphere. Get a reference image of a Yutyrannus skull in the background and conform the shape of a sphere into a skull. And also, don't forget about the lower jaw. It's pretty important. And then make the holes for the skull. And start adding teeth very slowly. And they're actually pretty curved, I didn't notice that just by looking at the reference. And yeah, also do the lower teeth, don't skip that, like ever. Then create the neck, just laying down vertices and then skin modifier with subdivision. Same method for the limbs, so legs and arms, and try to get the shape as soon as possible. Then block out the deltoids. They have like really odd shape, but they're kind of like an inverted C shape. Then add fingers, model them, and just play around with vertices to get a good looking shape. And then add the hook-like claws. Yeah, Yutyrannus was really cool. Then add the feet and also model the fingers, finger toes. Then add the toes, the claw toes. Pretty simple modeling as well. And then I start drawing where the muscles would be usually. And then also don't forget to show the bony landmarks, they're pretty important. And just start adding muscles for the torso. And can't forget about the small little toe on the side. And just start refining the whole body, adding muscles. Also remember that the latissimus dorsi, that big muscle, attaches under the deltoid. So yeah. And then I can start posing the whole model. Yeah, gotta add eyes. And then I want to pull down the lips as well. And then I start adding the details, like making the holes for the skull to make this guy really creepy. And then I get into painting to give him like a rotten look. I have some greens, and also I make his intestines fall out because why not. And here's the final result. Hope you've enjoyed. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the Noctober, where I create different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. First things first, delete the default cube and add sphere. Then using grab brush conform it to the shape of the Allosaurus skull. Yeah, it needs to look good from all sides. And then pulling out the crests. And also making holes where there should be holes for the skull. In the skull. Then I start adding the teeth. Firstly I model them and then I duplicate them, and if needed I just change the shape of the teeth of the tooth very, very slightly. And then I add the neck using vertices and then skin modifier with subdivision. Then similar workflow for the torso as for the head, just using grab brush to make a better shape, and then limbs, same method as for the neck. Then I add the deltoids, which are in the shape of an inverted C, and then I use grab brush to improve the shape of the legs and arms. Then I block out the sole of the foot, and I start modeling the toes. As always, the same workflow. Duplicating the side toes. Actually the side toes are gonna be smaller and shorter. Yep, also modeling the fingers on the hands. And then I model the hook-like claws. It's pretty fun. And then it's time to add anatomy to the model for believability. Also, the legs need to have that slight Z shape from the front. Pretty important. Also, can't forget about a small finger toe. And then I pose the model. Since limbs and torso are separate, it's way easier to actually pose the model. And then I get into details of the face, such as adding the lips and just improving the shape, and adding eyes, carving them in and then putting a sphere inside. And then I give a arm into Allosaurus jaws to make it look cool. And then adding wrinkles, which is super fun. One of my favorite things. And then I paint the model. I was really inspired by the Isles Allosaurus. And here's the final result. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to the October, where I create different dinosaur themed sculpts every day. Delete default cube and add sphere. Using the grab brush, conform it to the reference that's in the background so that you make a good looking Carcharodontosaurus head. Also remember that it should look good from all the angles. Then I mask out the crest and I pull it up from the geometry. Also I add the jaw muscles. Next up, you might want to add the teeth. They're pretty important actually. And then I want to add the neck, it's also important, and the torso. All that using the grab brush. Then add the limbs using vertices, and also can't forget about inverted C-shape deltoids that attach to the scapulas. Then get a better shape of the limbs just using grab brush. Then block out the sole of the feet and also model the fingers, which always looks the same in my every video. And also now it's time for the toe claws, just modeling them and putting them in place. I also like to make the feet spread apart a bit. It really gives something to the sculpt, which is pretty interesting. Using the same method for the fingers, but on the hands. Also adding the menacing claws. And then it's time to add the anatomy, which is muscles of the legs. And it's pretty fun actually. Same for the torso. Just adding more and more muscles, just first drawing them and then adding mass so that it feels more 3D than 2D. Yeah, also forget about the toe claw, like that little one. Don't forget about this, don't be like me. And then since the objects are separate, I can start posing the model. And also add lips. And then finally it's time for the wrinkles. They're pretty fun to add. Just most of them are gonna be around the places of the most movement. And then I paint the model and add a balloon to make him look more like a clown, a scary clown. And then I'm done with the model. Here's the final result. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to October, where I create different dinosaur-themed sculpts every day. First you get rid of that default cube and add sphere, using GrabBrush conform it to the reference, which is of a Quetzalcoatlus. Then I try modeling the lower jaw because it's pretty difficult to do it by sculpting. Then I pull out the crest from geometry by masking part of it, and then I add the neck by extruding vertices and applying skin modifier with subdivision. Then I sculpt the torso and start adding the limbs, and using exactly the same workflow as for the neck, as I said before. And then it's time for the legs, exactly same stuff, nothing too crazy. And then for the wing membranes, I create a plane and I try to conform it best by modeling to the reference, and then I apply all the modifiers, and using sculpting I get a better control of the shape. Then I block out the feet and start adding fingers. Those weird sausage looking things are fingers, yeah, I know. And then it's time for the claws, and I slightly play around with the rotation of the fingers to make it look more realistic. And same stuff for the hands. And by the way, did you know that long part of the wing that's after the wrist is actually a super long finger, which is really bizarre to me. Yeah, and then using GrabBrush I try to capture the silhouette of the limbs, like keep in mind what muscles will be where without even adding mass with clay strips. And then also I block out the deltoids, as always. And it's time to slowly start adding up muscles, which was pretty interesting to do because it's, as I said, it's such a weird creature, honestly. Like, there's nothing similar alive today to it. And then just kind of using similar muscle placement as for the dinosaurs. But yeah, like Quetzalcoatlus wasn't a dinosaur. I know someone in the comments will probably say that. Yeah, and then I add fat pads to the feet and just add general details, which I will actually skip in this video. And then I paint the model, which the coloration was inspired by Mothra, actually. Like the thing from Godzilla, the monster from Godzilla. So yeah. And then as the very last thing I use my custom VDMs, which will be available soon from my Discord server. And then here's the final result. Subscribe for more sculpt breakdowns. Welcome to October, where I create different dinosaur-themed sculpts every day. Oh boy, it's the last day. Anyways, conforming the sphere to the reference, which is unfortunately only found the side view. The more views you have, the better the sculpt is gonna be, because you expand your visual library. So yeah, putting down spikes and horns and tail. Actually, tail I used curves for it because it tapers down evenly. Then I put down the limbs using my usual workflow, which is vertices with skin and subdivision modifier. And then I'm just using GrabBrush to make the best silhouette as possible. So I'm just trying to spend as much time as possible on the lowest possible poly count, because the model is gonna look the best this way. You just cannot jump straight into details right away. And then I start putting down fingers and the feet and so on, the claws, etc. Then I'm just doing some slight tweaks around, and I start doing teeth because yeah. So to check silhouette, you can actually go to render mode, and by default you don't have any lights. So then you can just check the silhouette if it looks right. And then I start adding muscles, generally drawing them where they should be, and then so later on I can add mass to them as much as I want. And yeah, adding muscles to the legs and nothing too crazy. Yeah, also crease the muscles to give more definition, because if I were to add more details to it, like scales and more wrinkles, it kinda wears down a bit. So it's a good habit to make the muscle a bit more defined than they have to be. And yeah, just kinda showing where the tendons would be and detailing all the fingers. And then I start to add just a bit of asymmetry to make the sculpt a bit more interesting. And then lastly, I refine the head, which is probably the most difficult part, but it's the most fun one. And then I jump into adding wrinkles and I give a paint job to the Styracosaurus. And then I add these etchings to make it look really creepy. So yeah, thank you for being a part of this. See you in the long form content videos.